Michelle with Michelle Loves Books. Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of my Shadowhunter Chronicles reading vlog. In this vlog, I will be talking about the Infernal Devices trilogy. So the books in that trilogy are Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and Clockwork Princess. I hope you enjoy this. It's a little bit long. I tried to keep it pretty concise and straight to the main points and main ideas. Also, there are spoilers, so if you have not read these books and you do not wish to be spoiled, don't watch this video. Read them and then come back and we'll talk about it. So let's go ahead and get into it. Alright, so I just finished Clockwork Angel. This is a reread for me. I read this series about a year ago, listened to it on audiobook. Overall, I felt like I had a hard time connecting with the story, and there was a lot that I had forgotten. I completely forgot that Tessa even had the shape-shifting ability. That's kind of a big thing to forget. I don't know. So many layers to the plot that I kept missing, and I've been really having a hard time collecting my thoughts on it that would make sense to anybody. Organized my thoughts into categories. Let's talk about the setting first. 1800s London. With any historical fiction, with a lot of societal rules, expectations from women, and a certain propriety that must be maintained, which our main character, Tessa, has grown up with. But then she meets the Shadowhunters, and they do not follow those rules. I really loved this side-by-side look at the world. It's really odd to see how it's different just between Shadowhunters and society. Oh, we also have Camille. They're having a conversation at one point in the book, and she's just very open about her lover, who is Magnus Bane. That is very taboo to talk about, especially in this day and age. So she catches Tessa off guard, and it's really funny. Despite that the Shadowhunters really don't follow any of the mundane societal rules, they grudgingly allow Charlotte Bromwell to run the Institute. There's a point when the Lightwoods and the Clave come to the Institute, and they basically won't talk to her because she is a woman, and they won't talk to her without Henry's presence, and she has to fight extra hard to be respected in her position. It seems like everyone's trying to take the institution from them. Let's talk about the plot. This is probably the part I had the hardest time organizing my thoughts on. De Quincey and Mortmain, because for a while in the plot we thought that De Quincey was the Magister, come to find out Mr. Mortmain was, and we're first led to believe that he's innocent and he just makes these mechanical pieces which he sold to De Quincey, and this is the whole story that he gave them. And then they have these automatons, and the automatons are complexity all in their own in how they're made. So there's this whole mystery around Tessa and her ability to change into Peep when she changes into Camille. That whole thing was really cool, and how she learned to figure out what her responses would be based on her memories. Now the Magister, he said he created her. What went into her creation has gone back generations, so that's really interesting, and it kind of connects me to Valentine and what he was trying to accomplish. So the Magister created her, and he wants her. He wants to marry her, actually, which is really weird. Why do you have to marry her? And we still haven't figured out what he wants to use her ability for. And then there's Tessa's brother, Nathaniel, who's basically just been a pawn in this entire scheme and retrieving Tessa for the Magister. Now, the origins of the Pandemonium Club. So we noticed that the club that Clary and Simon go to at the beginning of City of Bones is called the Pandemonium Club, but it's just a dance club. When they talk about the club here in London, so it's basically this I want to say a gentleman's club, but a supernatural. No, it's a club for mundanes who have knowledge in the occult and downworlders and this side of things. Now back to the mortal instruments. Basically, mundanes are not supposed to know about this shadow world. It's kind of cool to see that. It's like somehow they've managed to hide everything from the mundanes from back in the 1800s. That sounds really convoluted. I hope you were following along. So there's this whole long story about the Pandemonium Club, which I just thought was really fascinating. Okay, so let's move on to the characters. And I knew some of them were going to be connected to the mortal instruments, so I was really trying to pick that out as I was listening to it this time. And it's really kind of cool how some of these characters are connected to each other. Tessa Gray, who's seemingly mundane, but has recently unlocked the power to shift into other people, retaining some of their thoughts and memories. And in the case of downworlders, being wholly one of them, when she turns into Camille, she actually becomes dead, and you go through those internal emotions, and she's also susceptible to her weaknesses. She's the heroine in the middle of this love triangle. I really do like Tessa. I didn't connect to her as much as I connected to Clary. She's not really one for drama, and I really like that. Then we have Charlotte and Henry Bronwell. They run the Institute. They're kind of an unlikely couple. They're not very, romantic with each other. Jessamine actually criticizes their relationship. I find that pretty harsh. Jessamine's personality, she's a very critical and judgmental character, so I take her opinions with just a grain of salt. Charlotte, she is such an amazingly strong woman. I love her. She basically ties the institution together, and she works so hard to take care of everybody and running the Institute. Of all times, I keep getting interrupted. Okay, so then we have Henry. I like him. I think he's funny. He's just really eccentric, and he's always just tinkering around with his inventions. He's not really to be taken seriously, which I kind of feel kind of sad for him. Especially when it comes to him and the Clave. Specifically, Benedict Lightwood is always trying to throw him under the bus. A couple of his inventions that he's brought to the Clave's attention have not worked out correctly. So it really kind of stays true to the time period of the Industrial Revolution, when mechanics and inventions were rapidly growing. I just loved this aspect. And the automatons also really play into this. So now we have James Carstairs, or Jem. He was poisoned by demon toxins, creating this degenerative disease of sorts and this addiction. If he doesn't take this drug, then he will die. But if he does take this drug, he will also die. And I guess the more he takes, the faster it's weakening and killing him in the long run. Yeah, there was a lot into that. So again, you can kind of see where Valentine was going with his ideas, and using other methods to combine demon blood with the Nephilim. Then Will Herondale. Now I know everyone is in love with Will Herondale, and we'll get to my feelings on Will Herondale. First of all, he is basically like Jace. He's aloof, he pushes others away, he lashes out, he lies about his feelings to create that wedge between himself and other people. He has parent issues. There's all these politics on the Clave can claim they're a Shadowhunter's children. That was really interesting. We still don't know what happened to why Will chose, but Will chose to come back to the Clave, which means that he can no longer really associate with his parents, and his parents even came back for him, but he still chose being a Shadowhunter over his parents. He runs into situations head first. He's very reckless with his life, so he is just so much like Jace, which isn't a problem because I love Jace, but I'm actually surprised that as much Jace-like as he is, I couldn't connect to him that well. There was the situation that really makes me hate him, and he's gonna have to do a lot of work to redeem himself, in my opinion, is towards the end when Tessa goes to Will and tells him that she cares about him and that Charlotte has allowed her to stay at the Institute. Will is so freaking mean, and he basically treats her like a whore. Earlier, Jem kind of explains the politics of how Shadowhunters can't be with anybody except for Shadowhunters. Since Tessa is a warlock, he really can't be with her, and he lashes out so harshly though because he can't be with her, and I think that his emotions runs really deep, and I think that he really loves her, or he really likes her at least. I think he wants her to hate him, and he's doing a really good job at it. While Tessa gets really upset about this, I feel like in a way she just kind of takes it, and maybe that's just because of propriety. It's not really uncommon for women to be put down like that. In society, a woman wouldn't lash out violently as maybe a modern woman would. Oh, but I had forgot about this. So there was a moment where Will and Tessa actually have a really steamy kiss, and that was a good literary kiss. Just saying. Maybe I'll get through this book talk. So then we have Jessamine. And wow, do I really dislike her character. I guess people compare her to Isabel Lightwood's character, but I don't see that at all. Isabel is who she is, but she's not a brat like Jessamine. I really understand that she hates that she's a Shadowhunter, so she could leave and she could not be a Shadowhunter, but then where would she go? Because women of this time period don't live on their own. It's very improper, and she's very much trying to maintain the fact that she's a lady. So she's very desperate. But so her character, she's very judgmental, and her desperation to get out propels her to attempt to use any out outsider for her out. I guess I should feel more sorry for her, but she just can be such a bitch. And so, I mean, I don't care what your situation is. You don't have to treat people the way that she treats them. She's just wholly consumed with herself. But she literally acted like Tessa's friend after being a bitch to her towards the end of the book and the big conflict when they invade the Institute. She just lays into Tessa and back to being awful to her. And then the familiar names that are popping up between the Infernal Devices and the Mortal Instruments, which in itself was really awesome to see. We have Magnus Bane and Camille Delacourt, or Lady Delacourt as they call her. In the Mortal Instruments, Camille is the lead vampire. In the Infernal Devices, she is under De Quincey, and De Quincey is the lead vampire. So sometime in this period, De Quincey is out of the picture and Camille rises up. Oh, there was some kind of drama between Camille and De Quincey because I guess Camille had fallen in love with a human. De Quincey had killed him or something. Camille seeks her revenge on De Quincey, and I thought that was really interesting. A whole nother layer, a softer side of Camille. Camille and Magnus Bane are lovers at this time, and I really liked Camille. Then we have the Lightwoods. Gabriel? Yeah, Gabriel Lightwood is 18 at this time period, and Benedict is his father. Basically, they're pretentious assholes. Gabriel specifically is always targeting Will and trying to throw him under the bus. They really don't elaborate much on why Gabriel hates him so much. I'm hoping that we will get to understand that dynamic a little bit more as this series goes on. And I feel like Benedict Lightwood, maybe even Gabriel Lightwood, I feel like these specific characters were mentioned in City of Glass at some point. I'm not sure. Okay, so that was a lot. Oh, to wrap up the plot, we have Mr. Mortmain, who is the Magister. He believes Tessa to be dead because she changed into a dead girl after holding a knife that killed her. He takes off. He takes the Pyxis, and it holds demon energies. So what they're trying to do with the demon energies is to bind them into his automatons, which is so cool because this concept is used in the Mortal Instruments as well. When the vampires have figured out how to animate their motorcycles, they are infused with demon energy. So that is really cool. I feel like I finally am connecting to at least the plot. So I look forward to the next book, Clockwork Prince. Oh, I did forget something. I forgot about one more character, Church, the cat. Okay, there's seriously something wrong with this cat. He's been alive forever. Church was a familiar to some warlock, I guess. I don't know, I guess we haven't learned about this yet. That was really cool that that's how he got his name Church, because he's the church cat and it's good luck to have a cat in the church.
First of all, Vlogmas is taking over my day. I spent hours this morning just watching everybody's Vlogmas videos and playing. I'm on Clockwork Prince. Just got to chapter 4. So where we left off in City of Angel, Mortmain has escaped, putting the London Institute in a pretty precarious position. In the first page, we learned that Will can talk to ghosts. So Magnus has sent Will to talk to this ghost to acquire some demon powders, and then he is also asking the ghost for some sort of anti-love potion, obviously because he wants to get over Tessa. I think it's not going to be as it seems. We're basically under this impression that as much as he loves Tessa, he can't be with her because she's a downworlder but they don't really know because she's not marked like a warlock. We're still really iffy about all that, but she's not a Shadowhunter. It doesn't matter what she is, he wouldn't be able to be with her. The council is Council Wayland. There's a connection to Jace there. Oh, and then the Inquisitor during this time is Inquisitor Whitelaw. Another cool tidbit about the Mortal Sword is that they use it, its real name is Melitok, I don't know how to say that, to force Shadowhunters to tell the truth, but it doesn't work on downworlders, so that's interesting. That wasn't discussed about the Mortal Instruments in the previous books. Yeah, so they're given this task to hunt down Mortmain and basically solve their problems. They have to do this within 3 weeks, I believe, otherwise Benedict is going to challenge them for the acquisition of the London Institute. Even the council is not behind Benedict, but unfortunately he says he's a blackguard and a hypocrite. Everyone knows that, but he's politically powerful and it's better to placate him with this show. He also called Benedict on taking this opportunity for his own acquisitions, that it's actually creating a divide when they should be teaming up together and working together to solve this epic problem. This councilman, he's good, and I feel like in the last 3 books we've had nothing but corrupt people in the clave, and so it's really refreshing to have somebody who's trying to get everyone to work together. So Benedict sends his sons Gabriel and Gideon and sends them to the London Institute basically as his spies. That's really underhanded. And then they are also in charge of training Tessa and Sophie basic self-defense. Tessa is not excited about this. She still believes that women should not be fighting. Still very weird to her. So they're trying to hunt down Mortmain, and they decide to go and see about these reparations. And what that is that a downworlder can lodge a complaint against the Shadowhunters through reparations, and they will keep a record of it whenever a problem is brought to them. So Mortmain was adopted by a warlock family, the Shades. They were unjustly murdered by Shadowhunters. They were like accused of something illegal. Something that they do talk about in the previous books was Shadowhunters can keep the spoils of any downworlders that they've killed. They had their motivations because it made a Shadowhunter family very rich if they killed so many people and kept all their spoils. So Mortmain went through the reparations and lodged a complaint. Nothing was done about it. So he holds a personal grudge against the Shadowhunters. They were accused of creating a weapon that could kill Shadowhunters. And because of the way things were, they didn't actually have to prove that they did or didn't do something. So it was a really messed up time. I actually feel bad for Mortmain, and I can totally see where he's coming from and why he has such a grudge. It's interesting that maybe he's actually using whatever invention they had against the Shadowhunters now. They are talking about the Demon City, and the Demon City is named Pandemonium, which is the name of the club that we were talking about, that Mortmain belongs to. There's that. Oh, Magnus and Will were working together, and they summoned a demon for Will. So Will is after something. They hint that he's cursed. He's obviously summoning this demon for answers to fix this curse. This seems very strange. Magnus totally calls him on this, and he's been living with this affliction for quite some time, 5 years. And at first I thought they were talking about Jem. Jem has been sick for a lot longer than that, so it's like something new has happened to create this drive to fix this affliction with him. I think that it's more than just that Shadowhunters can't be with anybody except for other Shadowhunters. There's something about this curse that's preventing him from being with Tessa. So I knew there was more to the story. And then we find out that Sophie is in love with Jem. That's really sweet. I really like Sophie. She knows that she's a servant and she's a mundane, so Jem would never look twice at her. And so she's feeling pretty jealous that Tessa and Jem are connecting, doesn't want to be around them. She also can't hate Tessa because she really likes Tessa too. She's also been scarred, was really sad. And then Jessamine also has a secret, and she's been sneaking off in the middle of the night in men's clothes. It's so un-Jessamine like her, because I could see her sneaking off for like trying to meet people as for somebody to sweep her off her feet and marry her, but obviously that's not her angle if she's sneaking out in men's clothes. So I'm very curious to see what's going on with Jessamine. Chapter 3 was a really long chapter. Tessa can't get over her feelings for Will, even though he was awful towards her. So they start bantering over books. Will cannot express himself, and he's very difficult to get along with, but somehow he can connect to literature very well. So they're specifically talking about this one book where he's obviously projecting. He seems to be trying to confess something or tell her something, or even maybe just test her reactions when he decides, if he decides he wants to tell her whatever his truth is. He wants to see, like, gauge how she would react, maybe. This is one of those tropes that really gets on my nerves because I like people who just say what's on their mind. I understand the need for this build-up and the secrecy because you don't want to, like, info dump everything. You want that time to like build the suspense, but like just say it. I want to know. He basically called her a whore. I just don't know what it's gonna take for me to be able to forgive him. So far not yet. However, I'm totally torturing myself because it looks like I probably will end up being like Team Will. The more I see how he's got all this baggage going on and he doesn't know how to express himself. I was gonna wait a little bit longer before I did an update, but like, what the heck is going on? So Tessa, Will, and Jem go to Yorkshire and meet Mr. Starkweather. I thought it was a brilliant plan. She was going to turn into him to try to access his memories. Oh, that man, he is terrible. Oh, I also forgot to mention, so Starkweather, that's Hodge's last name too. So they're like related. Yeah, what a grumpy old man, and he is like such a racist of, Shadowhunters versus Downworlders. He loves gloating about his spoils. Now, I thought spoils were supposed to be gold and jewels and things of value, but he's like keeping parts of the Downworlders, like fairy wings and stuff. Like, that is so morbid and gross. Trophies of his kills versus just a means to get rich. That's pretty fucked up. Apparently, so it says the Accords of Forbidden Spoils. In City of Glass, they talk about spoils as well, as if they are still practicing that. So I'm a little confused. Unless they reinstated it or something like that. So that's interesting. Something I want to keep tabs on and find the answers to that. He pulled all the records from the reparations. So what actually happened is that the Shades was in possession of the Book of the White. It was at the London Institute and it went missing under suspicious circumstances in 1752. Mr. Shade using the binding spells to animate corpses, and then he was also replacing some of their pieces with mechanics. So obviously Mortmain was continuing on with his work. I'm also wondering if that Book of the White has something to do with Tessa's gift as well. I'm wondering if Magnus Bane didn't have some sort of role in the Book of the White missing. In the records, they had an address for Mortmain Ravenscar Manor in Yorkshire. And this is where I'm at now. So they go out to this manor. They were told it was abandoned, but obviously somebody's living there. A girl that comes out to meet the coachman, which 3 of them got out because they wanted to assess the situation beforehand, to greet the coachman. He says something to her, and then she looks in their direction as if maybe he cued them in on where they were hiding. That's suspicious. So Will knows her. She's Cecily, and I don't remember who she was. I think it came up in the first book. I guess it'll come out again and we'll get the whole full story. So, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. I also don't know, did he think she was dead, or he's very, very shocked and surprised to see her there. What is she doing there in Mortmain's old home? What is going on? Okay, I've got to keep reading. What time is it? I have at least 3 hours to read before I have to go get my kids.
Alright, so I'm going to be wrapping up Clockwork Prince. The last we left off with my last vlog was at chapter 11, I believe. So from chapter 12 to the end, a lot happened between the relationships between Tessa, Jem, and Will. A lot happened. Sophie brings the invitation that Jessamine received for the party, the masquerade ball, a very personal note from Nate. They knock Jessamine out, tie her up. Tessa turns into Jessamine. They go to the masquerade ball and runs into Nate. Nate just spills the beans to her, but then he starts to suspect something's off, gives her some lemonade drink. She loses her inhibitions and starts to turn back into herself. She and Will have this makeout session on the balcony. Oh my goodness. But this all happened before we realized that this little drink made them lose their inhibitions. However, I guess the whole thing is they kind of wanted to anyways, so would it have happened regardless or not? Because I think Tessa was under the impression that Will had the drink as well, but I don't think that he did drink the drink. I think it was only Tessa, because Nate gave it to her. The next chapter goes into when they get back from the masquerade ball. They test Jessamine against the mortal sword, but there are blocks on her memory, and so she can't really tell them everything that they need to know. And then she gets sent off to the Silent City. And this is also a time when Sophie really starts stepping up, and I really like Sophie. She confesses to stepping out with Mr. Lightwood, Gideon Lightwood. That's really cool. I love that. I really want Sophie and Gideon to get together. Later on, when Gideon confronts his father, he basically walks away from his family, gives back the family ring, and he's going to stay at the institution. Sophie is now he's gonna see me as I really am. I'm just a servant and I'm a Medane. I feel so bad for her, but I think that it's all gonna come together. I don't think that Gideon cares. I think Gideon's a really good person. That's really exciting. I really want Sophie to have some love. She's one of the coolest sidekick characters, I think. Before all that happens, so they're at the Silent City. They have to persuade Jessamine into writing a note to Nate so that they can organize this little get together. I'm not surprised that they walked into a trap. Okay, so I got this book at a charity shop, and this has never happened to me before that I know of. So after she made out with Will, they go off to the Silent City. Her and Jem go to the Silent City to get that letter written from Jessamine, and they end up having a makeout session in the carriage on the way there, and Jem's like professing his love to her, and I guess she like crumpled some flowers on her hat, and Jessamine totally calls her out on it. She's like, if you're gonna be making out in carriages, like, you might want to get a new hat. Okay. I guess the next biggest thing that happens is Will sees the demon that supposedly cursed him at the masquerade ball. So he follows up with Magnus. Oh yeah, he has a brawl with this demon, and he captures a tooth from the demon. So now he follows up with Magnus so they can summon this demon and he can confront him about this curse. Well, it turns out when the demon came out of the Pyxis, he would have been way too weak to create a curse like that. Basically, the curse was a fake, and he's been living all this time thinking that he's cursed, elated that it's finally resolved, and he wants to run and tell Tessa as soon as possible. But by the time he gets there, Jem has already proposed to Tessa, and Tessa has accepted. Will confesses about this curse and tells her his story. It's like, it's okay, like, I can be with you now. She's like, you need to stop because it can't ever happen now because I'm engaged to Jem. Oh my god, like, my heart broke for Will. And I wasn't 100% rooting for Will until this moment, because I really like Will now, but I also really like Jem. I have to say, I don't think I've ever read love triangle like this before. Like, they have no idea that either of them has any interest in Tessa. It was so complex. In other scenarios where there's a love triangle, like, there's always been, like, without a doubt, the one person that I want the person to be with, but this is the one time where I don't know what's better for Tessa. Like, there's no good answer for Tessa, except I think that she did make the right choice, because who can break Jem's heart? And he's been kind to her from the get-go. He wasn't playing these games, no matter how justified it was on Will's part, but he's just a little late. Because a love triangle just should not be easy, I guess. The angst needs to be there no matter which way you turn. Also, on a really good note, finally, Charlotte and Henry, after all of these years being married, they were both under misconceptions about their feelings for each other, and they thought that it was just like a marriage of convenience and neither of them really cared about the other one. But finally, like, they have a moment where everything gets cleared up. They finally talk how they feel about each other, and like, now they're like swoony, happily married couple, and I love it. This stirred up some emotions, and now they have a baby on the way. So that's really, really cool and exciting. I'm so happy for them. Where we're leaving off in this book, Nate has died. I did leave off one thing regarding the love triangle, but she's been making out with both these boys, and now they're both loving on her. Okay, so the night when Will, like, confesses to her, she's like, well, what would you have me do? Go down the hall and, like, break his heart? Throughout the rest of the book, every time she looks at Will, like, she's trying to, like, talk herself out of her feelings for him. It kind of makes me feel like she's not happy with her decision to marry Jem. And that kind of feels shitty with Will. They have that passion that's just not exactly there with Jem. It's more, like, endearing and sweet with Jem, but it's that, like, first love, passion, angsty with Will. Plot-wise, where we're ending with this book, Nate has died, and Mortmain is still on the loose. I know we eventually catch him in the last book. I did not realize, but Clockwork Angel is a hefty book. I keep saying Clockwork Angel. I'm tired. It's my bedtime. But it's Clockwork Princess. I mean, I did not realize how long this book was. It is close to like 600 pages, I want to say. 570 pages. Cramathon hit, and I was about halfway through Clockwork Prince. I had put it down for a little bit, and I'm really enjoying it. Don't get me wrong. I'm loving how complex the story is. There's so much to it, and I want to capture it all. There's just something I cannot put my finger on, and I'm just like, I wasn't excited to pick up the book. I don't know if it just kind of like felt like a chore. What's going through the back of my mind is I just want to get these done so I can move on to the Mortal Instruments number 4. I don't know what the hell's going on in my brain right now. So that wraps up. I will catch you later when I get into Clockwork Princess, and we will talk about that one. I finished Clockwork Princess just like the other day. Honestly, this book felt like it took me forever to get through. There were times when I was really dreading picking this book up, which totally baffles me because I was feeling that before it even got to the slow parts. Yeah, I just think that that was like attributed to the fact that it was during the holidays. I was really prepping for my new videos that I was really excited to start putting out. Plus I was reading some other things. I knew that I really had to really get engaged reading this and taking notes. I really wanted to talk in depth about certain things that came up. I just feel like it took a lot of more intense note-taking than it generally would take. So I don't know if that was just kind of like made it feel like a chore. There wasn't as much plot, character development, world building as much as there was in the other two books, which I think slows it down a little bit because there's not like exciting new information, keeping it a fast-paced book, which is understandable because we're wrapping up the trilogy. But this is the longest book so far at 570 pages. The Gem Will Tessa drama really started to overshadow the plot in a lot of ways, which I don't exactly have a problem with. It was just carried out in such a way that really bogged me down. Because I guess in certain ways it was just really over-explaining things. Like how Will feels about Tessa, how he feels about Gem. I think this book would have been better if it was a shorter book. So now let's go ahead and recap some of the moments that I wanted to discuss from the beginning of the book. So Tessa and Gem, they're all ready to get hitched. Tessa's trying on her wedding dress when Gabriel Lightwood shows up to get help because Benedict Lightwood, his dad, has succumbed to the demon pox. Mortmain had quit giving him the medicine. He went mad and became a giant demon worm. And he ate Tatiana's husband. This whole scene was just epically funny, and I think what actually added to it, I have to share Emma from EmmaBooks video, which will be linked in the description box below. You've got to check it out.
I have demon pox. Now I take 1 a day demon X to reduce my risk of turning into a giant worm.
It was a video challenge that she had done for the biannual Bibliothon event where she talks about demon pox, and at the time it was funny, but I didn't get the connection. But like, I get it now. It all makes sense now. And of course, Will has all of his snarky worm jokes now. Before it was demon pox songs. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you've already read the books. Basically, Shadowhunter Demon STD. It's really funny. So we also meet Tatiana, I mentioned before. Tatiana is Gabriel and Gideon's sister, and she had been away. She's married. Although she's a wretched, self-centered, stereotypical Lightwood, she's very rude, but I do have to give it to her. While Gabriel and Gideon did go to the London Institute after this whole thing happened, Tatiana was supposed to go to her in-laws' house, but I guess she left there, and all of the Lightwood's things, I guess, are being repossessed basically by the Clave. But I guess Tatiana is trying to salvage the Lightwood name, and I guess she goes back to the manor. Yeah, I'm not really sure. They very lightly touched base on that. What I did not like about this scene is that everyone, well, most specifically, Tessa had insisted on going with them to check on this whole Benedict Lightwood thing. But she basically did nothing. It kind of felt like more of setting up this opportunity so that Will can look over at her. We can have these inner monologue thoughts of how much he desires her, which stacked into the whole overshadowing of the romance aspect and being a little bit repetitive. Like, we know how Will feels about Tessa. We know. So it was really basically just unnecessary. Cecily was fantastic. Cecily is Will's sister. She also really captured Gabriel's attention. She has been training to be a shadow hunter, and she proves to be really fierce. I guess she like jumps on the worm's back and like stabs it. I just really like her character. There's like a spark in her that I really admire. Like Will, she does what she wants, and she's very stubborn about it. So after all this, Gem gets ill, and we find out that he's been taking 2 to 3 times the amount of the yin fen than he was normally taking, because he wanted to have more energy for Tessa, knowing that it would shorten his life, but at least he could give her everything he had. So Mortmain had bought up all the yin fen. He knew eventually that Gem would run out, and he could use it as a bargaining chip to trade for Tessa. They sent an automaton with like a code to give the automaton if they agreed to the trade, which Gem threw in the fire, so nobody could even go behind Gem's back and do it, because we all know that's what would have happened. Mormon's gonna get his way anyways, and he sends automatons to invade the Institute and capture Tessa. Miss Dark is actually there. Miss Dark or Miss Black? Is it the Dark Sister? It is the Dark Sisters, but I think she's named Miss Black. I don't know. Miss Dark, Mrs. Black, it's like the same thing anyways, right? Mrs. Dark is there, but she's like some weird resurrection of herself. And then this is where it really started to slow down. Then we kind of have like 3 different things going on back at the London Institute. Charlotte is corresponding with the Clave. There's a lot of Clave politics regarding who's going to take over as consul. Consul Wayland's term is up. Mr. Wayland has appointed Charlotte. He is kind of going back on everything he's been built up to be. He wants to appoint George Penhallow instead, who is his cousin. There's just a lot of like letters going back and forth. Will goes off to go find Tessa, and Tessa is on her journey to wherever they're taking her off to. So Jem dies while Will is gone. That was so sad. Will could like physically feel the bond break between them. I was actually really not prepared for that. From when I had read it before, I knew that he died. I'd really forgot. I actually thought that he and Tessa did end up getting married and had some time together. Oh, another highlight I wanted to point out was back at the Institute, when Sophie finds all the scones under Gideon's bed. He had been ordering them just so that he could see Sophie. That was so cute. But I love what Sophie had said. She had been afraid for Gideon to move in and for him to see her as she really is, a servant, because ultimately it would separate them. But that does not bother Gideon at all, that although she's a servant, she also does not stand for disrespect. I think that that is what really stood out to me about this scene. So we're gonna skip forward near to the ending because there's a big chunk of pages in there where we go back from Will just traveling to find Tessa, and Tessa is escaped and she's just traveling. I found this part really boring. Will finds Tessa, but he like waltzes into this room and runs into Tessa. They find that they are locked in this room by an invisible force. And then they have sex. Jem is dead and they don't waste any time. Honestly, I'm really torn on this. I do have empathy, but I seriously have a problem with untimely romantic scenes. And this would certainly count. And I also feel like it's really uncharacteristic of Tessa. So yeah, I don't know. Okay, so then they're rescued and all hell breaks loose and they find that Jem is alive and kicking. Oh damn, I done fucked up. But Jem is going to be a and he can't have Tessa anyways. They can't get married. I'd actually completely forgotten about this plot line as well. It's like, did I even read it? I was honestly so shocked that Jem had chosen the path of becoming a silent brother after all of his talk about making peace with death and not wanting to live for eternity. But I really loved the insight into what it is like to become a silent brother? Shadow silent brother? But I definitely loved this opportunity in the plot line to offer us some insight in what it is like to become a silent brother. So Jem begins his transformation into Brother Zachariah. And I feel like we actually meet him in the Mortal Instruments. Do we meet him in the Mortal Instruments? I know there's Brother Enoch. Now, is Brother Enoch mentioned in this one? If they are, it's probably not super significant anyway. So Tessa finds the climax of her power and she becomes the angel. The whole Clockwork Angel in her necklace had the angel, I can't pronounce his name. That was so insane and totally unexpected. How am I so dense that I do not remember that? But we finally get to see what this Clockwork Angel is all about. All along it has had some unexplained mysticism about it, and we knew it was a token item from the get-go. The first book is called Clockwork Angel. Tessa, we finally discover who her parents are and what she's really made of. And that was so clever and a bit complicated. So Mr. Starkweather's daughter was Adele, who died, and we kind of touch base on there's something there, I think, in book 2. But she had died after her first Shadowhunter marks were placed on her skin. Mr. Starkweather, as we know, is this like horrible collector of downworlder parts. And the fairies decided to seek out their revenge and swapped Adele for a mundane baby. So the real Adele, the Nephilim Adele, grew up in the mundane world and also not being marked as a shadow hunter. So Mortmain had discovered this. Was he part of the plot? So Adele grows up, she gets married. Mortmain sends a shape-shifting demon to pose as her husband, knocks her up, and thus we have Tessa. So Tessa was born half Shadowhunter, or half Nephilim, and half shape-shifting demon, giving her her unique ability. So we have been this far understanding that Nephilim and downworlders cannot procreate because they only result in stillbirths. So how is Tessa born? And it's because her mother was never marked as a shadow hunter. So it's not a Nephilim thing, it's a shadow hunter thing. Mind blown! Which means that Tessa can have children. The rules of this world are so detailed and complex. Another, I don't know if you consider it a trope, but a trope if you will, that I really don't care for is that when all the characters have to pair up. And more specifically, they all have to pair up with people in their own circle. This is just something I've really been noticing a lot in books. I think it really first stood out to me in Six of Crows, actually. because there were a few relationships I felt like that were just kind of pairing up to pair up. And ever since then, I started noticing it more and more. So in this story, again, they all end up pairing up with somebody. Mostly I like all the pairings. It just really stood out to me when Cecily and Gabriel like immediately started to obviously develop something. I do like both of their characters, so I think they'll make a really cute couple. But I really liked Sophie and Gideon. We've already talked about Sophie and Gideon. Specifically, their relationship offers insight into ascension, and they use the Mortal Cup to make her a Shadowhunter. This was so cool. If anyone deserves to ascend, it is Sophie. We learned that in the Mortal Instrument that since the cup has gone missing, they haven't been able to create any more Shadowhunters. Actually, was it in the movie or the book? Clary says something like, well, why don't you just use the cup to make more Shadowhunters, because Shadowhunters were like dying out? And I don't think it was actually, but anyways, in Mortal Instruments, the cup has been missing for a long time, so they can't make any Shadowhunters. But I'm wondering if there's like another reason. So now that the cup is recovered in City of Glass, maybe we'll see another ascension. I am just so excited. So finally, Mortmain is defeated. Charlotte agrees to become the new consul. Another theme that I'm really noticing is that we've had, 4 corrupt clave members now? And those positions, like the higher positions. So I think it's getting a little bit tired, but whatever. Wayland admitted to only appointing Charlotte because women are weak, and therefore he thought he could manipulate her. I'm really glad that we can see Charlotte get up there and get some real, respect. Jem leaves to become a silent brother. Tessa and Will can be together now. Now that whole situation, I think it was just a bit overplayed. Jem visited them both separately to basically give them his explicit best wishes that they can go ahead and go be together. It just aired a little bit too much on the too noble and unrealistic. I think a simple, I just want you both to be happy would have sufficed. Implied permission. And let's be honest, they would have gotten together regardless. Maybe it would have just taken a little bit longer. Finally, the epilogue. This was such a great addition to the story. It fast forwards Tessa's life and history from the 1800s to 2008. Will had died in 1947. She follows Magnus Bane to Paris during the war, and then I think she and Magnus wind up in New York. All these years she had still been meeting Jem in their meeting spot for their 1 hour of time together a year. So when they go to meet up again, Jem appears and he is Jem again, no longer a silent brother. How convenient. He also finds a cure for his affliction that he had before he was a silent brother. I thought that once they were a silent brother, that they were a silent brother forever. However, he could never be the same as the other silent brothers for some reason. So it kind of probably plays into that, but I really hope that this anomaly gets explained. So now Jem and Tessa can have a full life together, and so Tessa is probably the luckiest heroine ever. She can have both of the men that she has ever loved. That's actually really sweet. Bonus material is that Tessa reports on all the children that were born. So Cecily and Gabriel Lightwood have 2 blue-eyed boys. Gideon and Sophie Lightwood have 2 daughters. Charlotte and Henry have plural sons and daughters with red curls like Clary. I am confused, however. At the beginning of this trilogy, we meet Charlotte and Henry as Mr. and Mrs. Bronwell. She's also considered a Fairchild. And then we actually talk about how Shadowhunters can keep their own names, that they don't always take their husband's name. And obviously, somehow, the Fairchild name gets carried down to Jocelyn and Clary Fairchild. I'm wondering how that happened. Jocelyn and Clary are the descendants of Charlotte and Henry. Charlotte does have a sister as well. Her sister isn't mentioned much. So of course, Tessa and Will, they get married, and I assume that they had children. And now that Tessa and Jem can also have a full life, I'm wondering if they're gonna have children. From the Mortal Instruments, I can't recall who are the Herondels, or maybe we will see it again in books 4 to 6. I'm really glad to be finished with this trilogy. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I really didn't feel like this was a reread. I'm just really happy to be getting on to the next set and books that I have not read yet. I'm really excited to get back into the world of my favorite characters. I know I'm really looking ahead here now because I still have 3 books to go. I expect that in the Bane Chronicles, maybe we will see Brother Zachariah and Tessa again. Maybe we will also learn how Jem gets released from being a silent brother. Also wonder if we're going to see more of them in the next generation now that they are in New York. That would be really cool. And also how the Mortal Cup finds its way to New York. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, Henry and Magnus make the first portal. And we learn more about runes and the different types of runes, how only warlock runes can be used to create portals. That was mentioned in City of Glass when Magnus has to come and create a portal to Idris. They said that only warlocks can create portals. Now we know why. Shadowhunters have their own runes. There are runes that only warlocks can use, and there's also runes that only Silent Brothers can use. I also know that the Dark Artifices series is a sequel series to this series, and we're supposed to follow those children that we had mentioned. I'm just like so glad that I'm creating these vlogs, and even if nobody watches them, they'll be an excellent tool for me to look back at some questions that I had and characters and like make those connections. Looking at this timeline, we start this series in 1857. The Mortal Instruments is... when did they start it? 2006 or something like that? The Dark Artifices will likely take place in between those two periods in what, like early 1900s? And I really look forward to that. Thank you so much for watching. Second installment. I will link the first one below. I would love to have part 3 up by like mid-February, but we will see. Part 3 will cover the Mortal Instruments book 4 through 6, and that is City of Lost Souls, City of Fallen Angels, and City of Heavenly Fire. Bye!